My name is Megan. I am the Finance Manager, Permit Compliance Officer. I primarily take care of the artifacts, so I make sure that they come in here, they get cataloged, they get stored correctly, and they get conserved. I'm also part of the project management team, so I make sure the divers have everything they need to go out on site, making sure that all the divers know what they're supposed to do, and in keeping in compliance with our permits and other things like that. At the end of 2020, our project manager at the time left unexpectedly, and so a lot of his projects, which one of them was the reporting, was kind of left to be picked up. And so I kind of grabbed it up along with Tim and looked at the reports and saw the responses from the state and went, okay, they're constantly having an issue with this, so we need to make sure that that's always there, and kind of creating a process for how to do this reporting. And I kind of just reorganized the report and made sure it was readable and accessible. They liked it. And so now, we're at a place where most of the time we get our reports accepted with little to no comments, which is a great accomplishment. And it's not just me, it's also the team making sure they get me the data that we need. Tim for reading it and proofing it, Dr. Bear for reading it to make sure it's archaeologically accurate, that kind of thing. So it's definitely a team effort, but I'm pretty proud that we've gotten to a place where our reporting is pretty much accepted without comment. I think the biggest challenge we have is the unpredictability of both of our sites. We have Juno, which is incredibly clear water, an average of like 100-foot visibility, but incredibly strong currents where you can't just stay in one place. You have to, make sure you're like structured to that place. And that creates a huge challenge for creating methodologies. Melbourne is almost the opposite. It doesn't have as much current, but there's times that divers can't see the gauge on their arm. So the visibility can go from, a few inches to sometimes being a few feet. But it's very rare that it gets, I haven't seen it get to 100 feet before. So we have challenges with figuring out the best way to do something when you have two very drastic sites you're working. But in my opinion, it makes a pretty interesting challenge figuring out what's the best way to do things. How do we do things in Juno versus Melbourne? How do we do things when we're out, past, however many miles that we don't have? We have different challenges. How do you make it sure everything works with the challenges that you have when you don't know what the conditions are until you get out there and you're like, if we know there's a hurricane coming, sometimes that will make the visibility worse. And then sometimes after a hurricane, it'll be better. Like for example, when we found the ring site, it was right after a hurricane. And so they went down there and had incredible visibility and so they could see everything. When I originally started, it was kind of a confusing thing, like how do you figure out where these things came from by just looking at it? And then I did a study on two spikes about this big that we had that are up at the state, and I looked at them and spent maybe a few hours with them and was able to write about a 10-page paper on it, just on these small little spikes by looking at the what they were made out of, how they were shaped, how they were formed, that kind of thing. And so looking at just the metal, you can see where something's placed in history by how much iron's in it, how much magnesium's in it, how much zinc's in it, that kind of thing. When you look at, for example, a spike, you can see if it's hand forged or if it was cast. And depending on which one it is, you can see if it was earlier or if it was later. Also, you can see if it has lines on it, that means it's wrought iron, which means it's probably gonna be hand forged, actually forged by someone and the metal stretched, whereas cast is just a mold. Yeah, and I think that's a big part of Seafarer is making sure that anything we find we can confirm is historic and isn't some, recreation of historic thing that's actually modern. In my mind, the Sea Searcher is an additional tool. It's a tool in the toolbox. So you have different things like the magnetometer, the side scan sonar, the sub-bottom profiler, and the Sea Searcher combines a lot of those things to target specific areas. It has incredible potential to make the process of finding a site, figuring out what's on the site, and selecting your right areas just streamlines that process completely. So I studied anthropology at University of Florida. University of Florida doesn't have a underwater archaeology program, but schools like East Carolina University and Texas A&M do, and I think they would benefit greatly from looking at this. There's not many times that I've seen that we've had a challenge. Do we just go, oh, we'll just we just won't do that then. We try to figure out some way to do it. Whether it be we don't have equipment, we'll find something else to do. If the waves are not good enough to go out diving, we'll see if we can go out and do a remote sensing survey. And so I think we try to always make the most of the resources that we have, whether it be however many divers we have available, boats we have available, equipment we have available, that kind of thing. I think we have incredible potential. I know there's a lot of sites around the world that people either can't get to because of funding or can't get to because of where they're located. I think with something like the Sea Searcher, we can find those sites, maybe using a magnetometer or something like that, and using the Sea Searcher to discriminate what's on those sites and the research potential of those sites. I think that with our can-do attitude and the great team that we have now, that we have the potential of actually going out and finding those sites and adding to the body of knowledge that is around the world about shipwrecks.